This meeting is being live streamed.
Boy.
Got it.
Well, it's setting it up.
I just said it's okay.
There it is. There we are. I have to delete live stream. I have to get out of this because it's like a 30-second delay.
Oh,
So it would totally mess us up. Oh, somebody else is here. Hannah's here. Hello, Hannah. So, folks, we left off last week. The last 2 weeks we've been going over the structure of the service, answering that perennial question of like, why do we say this prayer then and that prayer that other time? And why are some of them in the morning prayers and some of them in the evening prayers? And some of that's obvious, of course. It's like blessings that are about the morning, you're going to say in the morning. Things that are specifically about the evening, you're going to say in the evening. But as we've seen, there's more to it than that. Let's do a little quick review of that. I'm going to share my screen. So I sent you this. You all got this attached to your email, right?
I didn't get it. I don't think.
Oh, well, I'll attach it to the follow-up to this one too.
Okay, thank you.
So
I really have to have where it is attached to my.
so for our purposes today, you don't need to have it in front of you because I'm going to share it on the screen and you can just read it off your computer. And I'll attach it to an email again. If you want to have it for yourself and print it out, that's fine. It's a lot of good information in this introduction. So, and I'm not going to cover every little bit of it. But one of the things we did talk about was the structure, the overall structure of the service. And I think this is a good one to start with, this little diagram, because this really gives us the structure of, is it too small?
That's
I don't
me.
think there's anything I can do about it.
No, that's all right.
So what we're talking about here is like these boxes here where my cursor is. This is the structure of like a typical morning service, either Shabbat morning, or it could be any morning that there's Torah reading other than Shabbat, which would be Monday and Thursday. And the other mornings, you just take the Torah off here because you don't read the Torah. We don't take the Torah scroll from the Ark every day in morning services. You might be wondering, like, why not every day? Why, and if not every day, why Monday and Thursday?
Not the days.
And it's because the rabbis who put the service together made the decision that we're only going to do a Torah service when we're going to have a crowd, when we can honor the reading of the Torah by having a large number of people. And so they figured they would have a large number of people on Shabbat because people are not working. And we would have a large number of people on Monday morning and Thursday morning because those were market days when you would either go into the marketplace to buy things or to sell things. And to proceed that day, they would have a service. Since there were a lot of people in town, they would have Torah service those days. So let's look at the structure. The three main parts of services are these three: Shema and its blessings, the Amidah, and Torah. Those are the three pillars of Jewish services. And as we talked about last time, it may very well be that a part that's most meaningful to you doesn't fall into one of these, which is absolutely fine. You're not doing anything wrong if that's the case. And I think that's true for a lot of people. For example, Mourner's Kaddish does not fall into any of these. We'll see that falls into sort of like a conclusion. That was like an afterthought later, that it's not just us. It's always been very, very important to people because it's so important for people to remember and honor their loved ones who've passed away. Same thing, Misha Berach. Misha Berach is just like a little add-on in the middle of the Torah service originally. It still is in more traditional temples than ours. Way less important than the Torah itself in terms of like the rabbis who put this together. If the Misha Berach is more important for you, you're not doing anything wrong. Praying for the healing of those we love in ourselves is very, very, very meaningful to people. And that's all well and good. So if these three are the main ones, Shema and its blessings, Amidah, and Torah, and we're going to go into depth in all of these, I guess one at a time or something. Can't do depth on everything. This is our overview. We'll get to depth at some point. Then we've got these two sections. So Psuke de Zimra, verses of song. These are selections mainly from the book of Psalms. Oh, and by the way, the Shema and its blessings and the Amidah occur in the evening service. Like Shabbat evening, we're used to Shema and its blessings and Amidah being there. There are a few differences in exactly how they play out in the evening. And we'll go over that later on. Torah service does not occur in the evening. There's Torah on Shabbat afternoon. That's the only non-morning time of Torah. That's not true. Holy days, the festivals, and Yom Kippur also, we have non-morning Torah. But outside of those, Torah is a morning thing, except for Shabbat afternoon. And actually, that's where, for Havdalah attendees, you know that at Havdalah, we study the next week's Parsha. That comes from the Shabbat afternoon Torah service. Shabbat afternoon Torah service starts the next week's Parsha. It's the first Aliyah, like the first little portion of the next week's Torah portion, split into three. So there are three shorter Aliyot. Yes, Ruth.
If a person's having their bar mitzvah,
Yeah.
if they have it in the morning, they do one. If the kid's having it in the afternoon, would be doing a different parsha than he would if he was doing it in the morning.
That's correct. And that's the way we do it.
Okay. Is there any special time in the afternoon that it's too late, too early to switch over?
Are you asking in terms of traditional halakha or in terms of what we do at TCS?
I guess traditional.
Traditional halakha, there are specific times. There are calendars that have the times listed of what is the earliest time you could do the afternoon service.
Does it depend when the sun sets?
Of when the day, yeah, it's the position of the sun.
Okay.
Or it's like they split the daylight hours into 12 units.
Mhm.
So it differs depending on the time of year.
Oh.
Just like sundown and also differs depending on the time of year. The time that halachic afternoon begins is different every day of the year.
Just like when you light the candles, technically.
Correct.
Friday night. Can I also ask, how do we do it at TCS?
At TCS, the service is always at the same time.
So
regardless.
are we doing the same morning portion as
No,
the afternoon?
No, we do the next week's,
Oh, switch. Okay, that's what, that's simply answer. Thank you.
right? So we often have a situation where we have an afternoon bat mitzvah, and then the next week a morning bat mitzvah that are the same aliyah.
Okay, yeah.
They're reading the same Torah portion. Okay, so the Psuke de Zimra, these are selections from Psalms that are meant to sort of heighten all of this stuff before Shema. You could say that there's like an overarching goal there, which is to help people make the transition from their everyday lives into a more holy, spiritual frame of mind and way of consciousness. You know, the rabbis recognize that prayer is not easy for most people, and that going right from doing a little business deal right before service to saying the Shema is too abrupt, that there needs to be like a transitional time to help us get into a more meditative, holy, prayerful space. And so the main vehicle for that is Psalms. And what a psalm is, it means religious poetry. And of course, we probably are talking about religious poetry that's part of the book of the Bible called Psalms. In Hebrew, it's called Tehillim. So there are some things in Pesukei de Zimra that are not from the book of Psalms, but probably 80–90% of it is. And for evening services, for a weekday evening, there's one psalm, typical, or one just like line of a psalm, because a regular, like on a Wednesday evening, say that there isn't any holiday or anything, they realize people have things to do and it needs to be a short service. So there's just like one little line of a psalm to help us get into the prayerful mood before Baruch Hu, which is what starts Shema and its blessings. If I'm saying things that don't make sense or you have questions about, feel free to interrupt or ask a question. Now on Shabbat, Friday night, what takes the place of this is called Kabbalah Shabbat, which we'll go into in more depth another time also, which is also largely a sequence of Psalms. And there are a couple of things in there that are not Psalms. But the main piece of Kabbalah Shabbat is a sequence of 7 Psalms. You might ask, why 7? Because there are 7 days of the week, is the short answer. And there might be some other answers, but that's the short answer. And there are a few other things in there like Shalom Aleichem and whatnot. And that's also to help us get into a prayerful mood and to greet Shabbat. Both of these are later additions. These things all developed at different times. And this article says that Shema and its blessings is probably the oldest section, which makes sense because it's the one that's commanded in the Torah text itself. Like the text of Shema itself, if we look at it, it says, and you shall say this when you lie down and when you rise up, which the rabbis took to mean at night and in the morning, twice a day, every day. And since that is commanded in the Torah, they formed a servant, like a little container for it. The blessings are, I guess, a container for the Shema. So, and I have something for you to help you see more exactly what that is. And we'll look at that today. So they preceded it with Pesukei de Zimra. And now this is interesting. The Birkot HaShachar, the morning blessings. Now these were originally, it's things like Ma Tovu, that sequence of morning blessings, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'vina levchin bein yom uvein laila, that you might hear at a morning service. We'll look at that another time too. I feel like these were originally home rituals that people did individually at home. And there's some very interesting ones. So these were originally individual prayers that rabbis at some point decided, let's bring it into the synagogue. And who knows why? One theory that makes sense to me is that rabbis were concerned maybe that not enough people were doing it, that they wanted more people to do it. And so that if they bring it into the synagogue and they lead it, more people will do it and learn it. Any questions about this part of this chart so far? Comments, anything? So let's talk about this top here. So this top piece here, you could see is a detail of Shema and its blessings. How does Shema and its blessings work? Starts out with Baruch Hu, which is the call to prayer. And that makes sense because originally this was the start of the service. This stuff was added later on. Psukei de Zimra and Birchot HaShachar was added later on. And they're actually seen as like introductory material. Now you might go to a temple, synagogue that's not a Reform temple for a Shabbat morning service sometime. And it'll probably start at something like 8:30 in the morning rather than our civilized 10:30. And you'll see the service started at 8:30, but nobody's there. There's a handful of people there, and more people are coming each hour. And people are chatting during Psukei de Zimra and Birchot HaShachar. People might be chatting. People are walking in. And you might think, my goodness, they're not religious people. They're disrespectful. But they actually understand I believe in, there's a saying from Pirkei Avot, the sayings of our sages, that when you judge someone, give them the benefit of the doubt. Try to take a positive spin on it. And another way to look at it is they actually understand that the service really begins with Baruch Hu. And the stuff before it is to help people get in the mood and make the transition. And so if you're going to have a little chat with your friend, it's better to do it during this time than in the middle of the Amidah or a Shema. Anyway, there's a way to look at it. So Baruch Hu, originally the start of the service and the start of the official service, you could say, where we really want people to be present and paying attention and focused. And then we've got two blessings before the Shema, then the Shema, and then one blessing after. You might be wondering, what are these blessings? Well, let's talk about it. Oh, but first, this adds a couple of additional parts to the service. Conclusion includes Aleinu and Kaddish. Those were added later. Aleinu is from the Rosh Hashanah service. You might recall on second day Rosh Hashanah, I sing Aleinu to a special different melody, and I get down on my knees where we normally bow. That's the original place of Aleinu. And rabbis and people decided, we like this, let's do it every service. But we're not going to get down on our knees every service. We just bow. So that's where Aleinu comes from. Kaddish was originally not a mourner's prayer. It was a prayer to sort of put a conclusion on the reading of the Torah. And there are still all kinds of Kaddishes. There's Chatzi Kaddish, there's a half Kaddish, there's other Kaddishes. We only do Chatzi Kaddish and Mourner's Kaddish at our temple, except on Yom Kippur afternoon, I do another Kaddish. Anyway, silent prayer here. Don't confuse this. When I first saw this chart, I was confused because I thought that they were talking about the private part of the Amidah. Because the Amidah, as you know, we say part of it together. And then we have a private meditation where you could read the text or pray from your heart. That's not what this silent prayer is talking about in this chart, that there is something else that was added for private prayer. It's called Tahanun, which if you look at it in a prayer book, it's really about how sinful I am. So it has not been very popular in liberal Judaism. It's still done in Orthodox Judaism and most conservative, or some, I don't know, some conservative temples don't do it, I think. So the petitions are normally private. Amidah could be a combination. We'll talk more about this in detail. The way that we do the Amidah, where we do the first page out loud together, and then we have a private, is sort of a shortening of the traditional. The traditional is that everyone does the whole thing silently or privately, and then the cantor repeats the whole thing. Now, when there wasn't enough time, you would do the way that we do. So we don't have enough time for that. What I just added on this chart, I would say is not that important for us, but I just wanted you to know what's in it. Any questions, comments about this, Ruthie?
What does Kaddish mean? This Hatzi Kaddish, Mourner's Kaddish. What does Kaddish mean in English?
So Kaddish is from the root Kuf Dalit Shin, which means holiness.
Mm-hmm.
So other words that you might be familiar with that have the same root are Kiddush,
Mm-hmm.
Kedusha, Kadosh. They all have to do with holiness. So Kaddish would mean sort of, I think that form of it would mean kind of like holy thing, like a holy piece, a holy prayer about holiness.
Also,
Yeah, yes.
in the recesses of my mind, I remember they said something about it really wasn't about death. It was to honor a teacher. Am I mixing it
The
up with something
original
else?
form, yes, the original form. I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think what you're talking about is that the original form of this is known as Kaddish Rabbanan. I think that's the oldest one.
Okay.
And it's the longest one.
Mhm.
And it's done not really to honor a teacher. It's was originally developed as a prayer for rabbis to say after a session of studying Torah with each other.
Okay.
So the teacher part may be from, often the closest we come to doing that is we sing Debbie Friedman's song, Kaddish Rabbanan, which says, for our teachers and our students and the students of the students. It's a way of saying everyone who studies Torah at whatever level. But yeah, so that's the oldest one, and the other ones have been adapted from that. There's no version of the Kaddish that says anything about death or mourning. So we could go over that another time also, but like the very short version is that it's a prayer about the holiness of God.
Mhm.
And it was given to mourners at a later point in history from when it was written. One of them was given as a way for mourners to sort of identify themselves and help both themselves with their mourning, but technically to help the soul of the departed make its transition into the afterlife by, saying Kaddish in their memory. Okay, let's keep moving. Finally, we get to a chart. No, it doesn't. What, does this add anything? This does not add anything from the previous chart that I can see. So let's keep moving. Finally, here we are. So this one only gives us Shema and its blessings. And this actually tells us what these blessings are about. So the first blessing is about creation, Yotzer in the morning service. Call it means creation. Second blessing is about revelation, Birkat Torah, which means blessing of the Torah. Revelation meaning the revelation of God giving Torah to the Israelites at Mount Sinai. That's the revelation we're talking about. Then we've got the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. And then we have a blessing, redemption, Geula. And the thing that we're most familiar with from that is Michamocha. Now, I'm going to share something else now. I wanted to give you a little bit more detail than that. So I made a little chart that's not quite as pretty, but I think it's informative. Where is it? There it is. Let me show you this. I can send you this too. So what is Shema and its blessings? So we got blessing 1, which is about God as creator. Of the things that we do at TCS, roll into dark is in there. And I guess from Shabbat Nashira, El Chai V'Kayam is also in there. So we'll look at those in a moment. Blessing number 2 is God as revelation giver, giver of Torah, includes Ahavat Olam. That's what we always do from there. So we'll look at that too. And then Shema, what is Shema exactly? Because we don't do the whole thing at TCS. And not only at TCS, this is what we do is the norm for Reformed temples. But let's talk about the whole thing. We got 3 sections of Torah in there. The first section includes the line Shema and Ve'ahavta. It's about monotheism and loyalty and love of God. Then we have a paragraph, a long paragraph that we skip entirely in the Reform movement. There might be some exceptions to that, but I don't know. Starts with the words V'hayayim Shemoah, and that's about acceptance of the commandments and reward and punishment. I think we might have talked about that at one point, but we can talk about it again. And then there's a third paragraph from the book of Numbers that starts with the word Vayomer, and it has 2 subjects, tzitzit as a reminder to do the mitzvot, the commandments, and our redemption from Egypt. Then after the Shema, we've got blessing number 3, God as Redeemer, which includes Michamocha, is the thing that we do from that paragraph. Any questions about this? So I'd like to just talk about these 3 themes of the blessings for a moment. Creation, revelation, redemption. So those were very carefully chosen by the rabbis who created this section of the Siddur, because those are seen as the 3 main theological themes of Judaism. that if you are exposed to those and understand those, you understand something about Judaism. So let's just talk about them for a second. So, God as creator or creation. What part of the Torah does that refer to?
Beginning.
The
Bereshit.
beginning. Yes.
Yeah,
Beginning,
Bereshit.
Bereshit,
Yeah.
right? Is that unique to the Jews?
No.
No, that's a universal. That's the universal God. Doesn't matter whether you're Hindu, Catholic, Buddhist, or Jewish, God the Creator applies. Blessing number 2 of revelation, specifically the revelation of Torah at Mount Sinai.
It's Jewish.
That's specifically Jewish. That's not to say that there aren't other religions that value that. All the Christian religions and Islam also value Torah at Sinai, but those are daughter religions, you would say, of Judaism. That's why. Is that a new concept?
No.
No, okay. And then after Shema itself, we've got God as Redeemer, redemption. And so
That's Christian too.
yeah, well, there's a lot that Christianity and Judaism have in common. Christianity grew out of Judaism and kept most of it and just added things and deleted a few things and adapted. So redemption is an interesting one, and it's interesting that it comes after Shema because this is the one that has both a past and present aspect and also a future aspect. That a lot of the language of God as Redeemer is that God is certainly not finished with the work of redeeming. Maybe not finished. There's the idea that God renews creation every day and is always revealing things to us in our insights of Torah. But redemption has even more of a futuristic aspect of like there coming of a Messiah when things will be better, and when the Jews will all be gathered together and will resurrect the dead, and all kinds of amazing, wonderful things will happen at sort of the end of time. And all that ties in with God as Redeemer. And I could hear like saying, well, that's Christian, all this Messiah end of time talk, but we've got it too. And maybe we had it first. They took it in a little different direction. Any questions about this? I want to look at this in the Siddur with you now. So get your Siddur. Actually, let me ask you a question. Do you guys want to take a little break from this and read some Hebrew? You want to do some Hebrew? No. Mike does not want to do Hebrew today.
No.
I'm not
I have a
hearing like
question.
big crying out for Hebrew.
I have another question. It
Sure.
may not be related. Did Judaism come from another religion, so to speak? You say that like the Christian religion kind of grew out of or came from the Jewish theology.
Yeah.
Now, did the Jewish theology come from something else prior to that we know of?
That's a good question and a hard one. That's a question that I can't answer. I don't know if anybody could answer that because the answer is there are probably, the answer is probably in some ways it came out of older religions, but we don't really have any information about, we don't really have much
It's not codified.
knowledge about them.
Mhm.
So there probably is some stuff written about like that. There are aspects of the Torah that seem to point back to some older beliefs.
Because I'm sorry.
But our knowledge of it is a lot more speculative
Yeah.
than, because they don't have written records so much.
Yeah.
Like we do have some written records of like Mesopotamian religions and Egyptian religion.
Mhm.
And there are lots of scholars who have made a living drawing parallels between those and finding links. So Judaism in its development, and maybe before Judaism per se, Israelite religion, the religion of the Torah, it lived in its context and was influenced by the other religions that were going on at the time and before it. Is that enough of an answer?
Yeah, that's enough because it's like, yeah. Thank you.
Great. So since we're not having a huge outcry, no, we want to practice reading Hebrew.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Let's look at some of this. So let's focus on Shema and its blessings. So let's look at Shabbat evening, since that's what most concerns us, right? So let's go to where Shema and its blessings begin on Shabbat evening, and that is page 28. So page 28, you could see, let me point out a few things on this page. First, the title of the section is called Kriyat Shema and its brachot. You know, brachot is the Hebrew word for blessings, but what is this Kriyat Shema?
Wait, where are you?
I'm at the title at the top of page 28. Right, look on the English side. Very top line, it says evening service, Ma'ariv. And under that it says Kriyat Shema and its brachot. That's the line I'm talking about, okay? So this word Kriyat is from this root, Kuf Resh Aleph. You could see on the other side, you got Kuf Resh Aleph with a couple of other letters filling it out. And that means to read, and more specifically to recite, like read out loud. And so the Shema is something that's supposed to be read out loud. It's supposed to be, and you might see this in different forms, like in a traditional synagogue, you will have this like cacophony of people doing it individually, maybe not that loud, but out loud, individually out loud in all different speeds and different places, not together. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm getting a headache, get me out of here. But they're following the halakha, which is to actually form every word with your mouth and have a sound come out, right? And if you think about it, while it might be less aesthetically pleasing, if I'm a beginner at it and you're a well-advanced person doing it for 30 or 40 years, we can't really do it properly at the same speed, and each of us say every word. So that's where that comes from. All right. The other thing about that title, Kriyat Shema and its brachot, are, okay, I've got news for you here. This is not a prayer. The Shema is not a prayer. They are passages of Torah that we are reciting. It's not a prayer from the heart. We're just reading the Torah. We're studying Torah out loud. Yes, we're supposed to have a spiritual experience from doing it, but it doesn't fall into, did we talk about like these categories of prayer of praise, petition, and thanks? It's not one of those. We're not asking for anything. We're not praising God particularly. We're not thanking God particularly. It's a statement. They're passages of Torah that rabbis selected as encapsulating Jewish belief. It's the Jewish catechism, okay? It's Jewish dogma. Yes, Teresa. You're muted.
What jumps out at me is, I think it's like the third section down. It says, what you're just talking about now is acknowledgement. It's like this bracha, we acknowledge the miracle of creation. I don't know if that's something kind of like what you're saying. You know, that's all. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, so the big paragraph on page 28, you're saying, that starts praised are you? Is that where
Yes,
you are?
right above it, there's a little
Oh, yeah.
breakout, indent. It's more like, you're just acknowledging, you're saying the prayer, you're acknowledging it, that there was a miracle of creation by saying the
Right.
Shema.
Right. So Shema itself, this stuff, the passages from the Torah, that is the Jewish creed that we are reciting in the hopes of internalizing it. The blessings before and after, they're a framework for understanding the creed in terms of Jewish theology. They're like, each one's like a little essay that we're reading. So this really is not prayer. Is that shocking? You don't seem very shocked. I think it's shocking. And I've known it for years. All right. So you can see this big paragraph as on this page. It's a little essay about God's role in creation, of bringing night as part of renewing creation. Your word bringing the evening dusk, you open with wisdom the gates of heaven. You do the creation of the succession of seasons and arrange the stars in the sky. You create day and night. So and let's turn the page, unless there's some questions about that, to 29. Here we have Ahavat Olam. Now, I often, and I think Rabbi Ken probably also often contextualizes this for us during services as being about God's love for us, which is true. And how is God's love expressed? It's through revelation, the giving of Torah, of guidance through life, of good rules and commandments for us to follow so that we have a framework within which to live a good life. Now, that might be a little bit slightly different emphasis from the framework that I just gave you here, that like the main point is the revelation, is that God is the giver of Torah and mitzvot. And the way that is framed within the prayer, not the prayer, the little essay, is that this is how God expresses God's love for us. It was an act of love, not an act of like, you will do this. No, it's an act of love. Questions, thoughts? I'm doing a lot of talking today. All right. Now let's go to Shema itself on page 30. So I put little summaries here that I think I got them from. I have various books that I don't just make all this stuff up. I actually research some of these things and learn in order to teach. One of the books that I use besides My People's Prayer book is, this is a book that the conservative movement had put out that is a commentary on our Siddur. It's kind of nice the way it works. I'm going to turn to our page. So it's actually a lovely book. The way it works is it has the actual page in the Siddur, and it's surrounded with commentary. You see how, like, this is the page in the Siddur, and this is additional commentary. So anyway, I don't know why I told you that, but that's where I got these summaries from. I might have reworded one or two of them to make them the way that I like. So if we look at the line of Shema itself, like the Adonai Echad seems to bring up either monotheism or exclusive loyalty, right? And exclusive loyalty is probably the older meaning. And that's why, if we look at the English, Siddur Sim Shalom does not translate it as Adonai is one. It translates it as Adonai alone, which means something very different. What's the difference between Adonai is one and Adonai alone? There. Someone explain it.
I don't know.
I think the meaning is quite different. Teresa?
David, I kind of see it as Adonai is one. For me, it seems like it's incorporated as like the whole faith, and that means a lot of different people and ideas. And Adonai alone is the I don't know. I guess I'm lost here. No, that doesn't make sense to me now that I'm saying it out loud. So I'm not
I
sure.
heard something interesting in what you said. Like one of the ways that I personally have been seeing this is I like lately, the way we see all these things, or the way that I see them, changes over time.
Yes.
But the way I like seeing this right now is Adonai is our God, like Adonai Eloheinu, sort of indicates diversity, like you said, that there's a whole range of, everybody has their own beliefs and everybody has their own view of God, especially since no one knows what God is anyway. But then Adonai Echad, that they're all, even though they're all diverse and all unique, it's all one thing, sort of holding that paradox of diversity and unity together. That's only one way of looking at this. I think when they say Adonai alone, what they're getting at is that
Responsible.
originally, there's plenty of stuff in the Torah that talks about other gods. Now, whether they viewed them as real and powerful or whether gods in people's minds, well, it's not clear. But I've seen an interpretation of this line that says, there may be other gods, but Adonai is our God. and Adonai is our only God. Those other gods may be out there, but they're not ours.
Mhm.
So that would be a very big, like, if you interpret Adonai Echad as Adonai is the only God,
Yeah.
that would be saying there are no other gods. That's what pure monotheism is, saying that anything else that someone says is a god, they're wrong. It's a figment of their imagination.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
at minimum, this is, especially if we link it with, so Ve'ahavta, you have to take out this Baruch Shem Kavod line, because that's not in the Torah. We'll talk about that in a second. So that line, Ve'ahavta is talking about you shall love Adonai your God. And all these commandments in the Torah, take to heart, teach them, recite them, bind them on your body, put them. So it's saying that you need to, that we as followers of God need to take the commandments to heart, do them, teach them, and do them out of love for God and loyalty to God.
Mhm.
So that's there. Now this second paragraph, this long paragraph that starts right under Ve'ahavta, rest of the page there. We don't do this paragraph in the Reform movement. I don't know if we've talked about this. Tell you what, let's read it in English. Will somebody read out loud? Actually, you know what? We don't have, let's go into this next time. Let's do this next time. Let me just, let's do less detail. So this is a paragraph that we don't do. We'll talk about why next time. Turn the page to 31. Now you probably know that we do the end of this paragraph. There are two topics in this paragraph. We do the second one. First paragraph is about the tzitzit, the fringes on the talit, and why we wear a talit with tzitzit is to remind us to do all the commandments. Reform movement decided, well, we're not necessarily encouraging people to wear a talit with tzitzit, and certainly not to wear the tzitzit undershirts. And we're telling people that the commandments, especially the ones that are not ethical commandments, are things that people can choose to do or not to do, depending on whether they're meaningful or not. So that's problematic. But we do say this part about redemption from slavery in Egypt. All right. And now let's turn the page one more time to 32.
The truth about me is our God.
Right.
Okay.
And here we have Micha Mocha. And Micha Mocha is basically the culmination of this long paragraph above it about redemption. We see, we affirm the truth that Adonai alone is our God, and that we are God's people, Israel. God redeems us from the power of kings and delivers us from the hand of all tyrants. Almost enough said, although they say a lot more. So that's our structure. Now, Hashkivenu was not in the original rubric. It was added as a prayer for lying down at night. We can do that another time. That's on page 33. Page 34, Vishamru. is added just for the Shabbat service because the Shamru is about Shabbat. On page 34. And the theory that I find interesting about why Vishamru is added here is that it's to remind people when they're going to say the Amidah privately next, that they say the Shabbat Amidah, not the weekday Amidah. That they say the Amidah correctly. Because the Amidah is on the next page, 35, A or B. Any questions, comments, requests?
I do have,
Do you
I
like
do have some,
I like it? Yes, Teresa?
just something quickly. During any service, when we get to the Amidah, I kind of am lost at that point, because I know coming from other religions where you're supposed to do the self prayer, I don't understand why there's some reading and then you cut off and go to like 3 pages over last paragraph. Why all that middle stuff is kind of cut off. Why is it important to go to that last paragraph or a different paragraph?
Okay.
Because I know it's not last.
It's a great question, Teresa.
Next time.
I'm going to give you a really short answer and then put us off until like we actually get to that.
We
in the
study that.
curriculum.
Okay.
So here's the short answer. So the short answer is that the Shabbat Amidah doesn't have the usual petitions that you have on weekday Amidah. We might have talked about that a little bit. The middle part that we're leaving out is really all about the gift of Shabbat and the holiness of Shabbat. It's about appreciating Shabbat. And we don't do that at our temple out. Like that's often not done out loud, or it's in some temples they might have some songs based on it. But for our community and most Reformed communities, it's A, too much Hebrew, B, not the most meaningful thing for people. And so we instead devote that time to a private meditation on what people want to pray about in their heart.
Yeah.
But we, for the sake of tradition and still doing the Amidah, we want to sort of begin and end with the Amidah.
Okay.
Is that enough for now?
Yeah, that's great.
Ruthie?
I don't know if I'm going off topic. Rona and I also still are interested in, every week we meet and we discuss class, but we also are doing a little Hebrew practice because we're both not that great at it. Do you have any sections specifically maybe we should work on this week to when we practice our Hebrew with each other?
Well, what I was thinking was that while we do this unit of talking about Shema and its blessings, we would do some of the parts that we do in services.
Okay,
So
that's
you
what
could get a head start. You could start on
page.
So let's say next week we are going to do what page? Hold on. Where are we? Let's say read what's on page 28.
Page 28. Okay, in
Yeah,
the
practice.
Siddur.
You want to practice reading Hebrew?
Oh, that yeah.
Practice page 28.
Okay, we will.
So we don't say all of that out loud.
Mhm.
We actually don't say any of it out loud at most services. But roll into dark is, you want to see where roll into dark Hebrew is and where El Chai V'Kayam is? Turn to page 28. I'll show you.
Okay.
So this paragraph Fourth line, there's a period after the word kirtzono.
Yeah, I see it.
That word
Right here?
borei, that's where the Hebrew from roll into dark starts.
Tahanun.
Borei.
Re'yah
It's
golel or mipnei choshen, and until the box. That's where
Okay.
the roll into dark Hebrew is.
Uh-huh.
El Chai V'Kayam is the second to last line, second word.
Second to last line, second to last word.
I mean second word. Second
Second,
word up until the end of the line.
Okay.
That's El V'Kayam.
Okay, thank you. So basically,
All right.
thank you. Page 28 will do.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a lovely week.
Thank
And
you.
next Thursday is Thanksgiving.
Oh,
I'll see you in 2 weeks.
yeah.
Everyone.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Yes, yes.
Thanksgiving,
Bye,
everyone.
all.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for the
Bye.
time you prepared this class. We appreciate it. And Rona, thank you. Hannah, thanks for sending that. Bye-bye.
Bye.